You were saying that having that spare trigger at the end of the day would be a smart, you would say, choice for a competitive shooter.
For a competitive shooter or a recreational shooter even that's going to travel. You know, someone that's going to travel.
Or if you're not close by to a qualified gunsmith.
That's right. I mean, it's one of those things. It's when we see, like I say, when we see broken guns, okay, in these clay target guns, usually the problem is in the trigger assembly.
Oh, the gun itself doesn't.
No, I mean,
so we're talking broken guns is always something in the trigger.
Something in the trigger group that actually breaks and it shuts down. Now, having a spare trigger assembly is not going to eliminate the need for correct periodic service. You know, we're still concerned with ejector timing. We're concerned with the way the locking bolt bears on its bites to hold the gun closed properly. The opening, closing, hinging tension is somewhat important, and you know that's governed by parts in the fore-end iron assembly. So,
which is a good point right there.
Yeah.
People are saying that the new guns are very stiff.
Yeah.
That's a very most people say that they're very stiff now. What do you do to make them soft? Basically wear the lugs a little bit out where they'll naturally happen over time.
Stiff in terms of the opening and closing, the hinging, what we do is be careful if you're going to do this at home.
Don't do this at
home.
Don't
do this at home. We take a little bit of material, depending upon the model of the gun, okay? We take a little bit of material off between the rear end of the fore-end iron where it bears on the...
on the face of the receiver there?
Not on the knuckle of the receiver, but the fore-end iron to the lug on the barrel.
Okay.
Okay? The back of that fore-end lug in the surface on the fore-end iron creates the tension of that fore-end assembly pushing against the knuckle on the receiver, and that's what controls the hinging. And if the gun is really, really tight, too tight, you know, we just make a little adjustment there. I mean, it has to be done correctly because there are angles that are involved, and of course there's a very, very close tolerance. When I say we're taking a little bit off, I'm talking about a couple thousandths of an inch.
So really don't do it at home, because if I get guns here now that it's all screwed up, we know where it came from.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right, and I don't want to be in trouble. So, you know, the other thing is, too, as we say, when you get a new gun, regardless of the brand, regardless of what it is, the most sensitive part of the gun is that knuckle area. So,
right on the rotation.
Right on that rotation, where the fore-end iron runs on the receiver. And on a new gun, those surfaces need to sort of burnish themselves. And burnishing is the microscopic polishing of the high spots of the steel against each other. It pushes them down, and there's actually a wear hardening that happens there. And if you don't properly lubricate that surface and you get a little speck of sand or something in there, it can tear. And once it tears,
you did explain to them once that if you looked with a microscope or something on the face where the rotation happens, it's almost like there's a bunch of little small craters or little teeth, whatever it is.
Looks like the surface of the moon, you know, microscopic.
That's why greasing is the best way to go about it.
Grease is better than oil.
Continue to self-polish.
Yeah, it self-polishes itself, and that's and that's really for all guns. You know, I mean, you're never going to have a gun that gets to the point to whereby you don't need to lubricate that knuckle. You know, and a host of problems can be avoided if that just continue to be lubricated. Now, talking about lubrication, it's kind of like saying if you had an automobile and you never changed the oil, you just continued to add oil to it. You know, eventually the oil becomes contaminated and it no longer has the correct lubricating properties. In a shotgun, you know, that's not a sealed system. You know, your automobile engine is a sealed system. Stuff can't go from the outside into that oil reservoir, right? In your gun, you're opening and closing it. The wind is blowing around. A dry day. Down here in Florida, we have that fine powdery dust, you know, and all that acts as an abrasive. So the idea, and when you're properly lubricating your gun, is not to just continue to add oil or grease. It's to take the dirty oil and grease off and put nice, fresh lubricant on it.
So you're saying that after spending 10 grand, I still have to do my self-cleaning?
You still have to do your self-cleaning.
Interesting.
You know? If you want to bring it in here, look, we got guys, you can pay them. You can pay them. The difference is if you don't clean your own gun and you want to bring it in here and have it done, you have to tip the gunsmith.
Yep.
You have to tip them to clean your dirty gun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it is important because, you know, me, even though people watch the channel, they already know, you know, what I do, and I did do a video about lubricating upper DT11, you know, and the question was, well, it's a lot of grease. Well, you know, and it just like, you know, by the way, he taught me, so it's a problem, it's his fault. But it is very, very important to people to understand that grease, not oil.
Grease on the knuckle, not oil. Once the gun has been fired and the opening is very, very smooth, opening and closing, you can kind of move from grease into oil. And I think we also want to say, when we're talking about oil, we're talking about high quality synthetic oil. We're not talking about penetrating oil. You know, WD-40, 556, some of those, those are penetrating oils, you know, and they're really meant to free rusty bolts and things like that. They don't have particularly good lubricating properties or anti-corrosion properties. So, you know, people always say, well, Rich, which do you use? We have an oil that we sell that we like. I'm not saying it's better than many of the other oils that are out there. We've used it. We use it. We like our oil. We like our grease. They're synthetic, so you know, we know it's very high quality. Yep.
Now, the one thing that happens too, and I think is important to explain to people how it happens, is the rust, the importance of wiping their guns, and the rust building factors on each person having different acidity on their sweat. Yeah. Because we do see a lot of guns that right where you grab the gun to put it on the rack, you can. That's usually the first spot that you can start see a little bit of rust and bluing going, and it is not because it's a bad gun or crappy bluing. It's just. Yeah. It goes back to you spend a lot of money on this item. For some people, $2,000 is a lot of money. Sure. For some people, $100,000 is a lot of money. No matter what it is, should still be cleaned. If you're going to cost us more than $2,000, they need more cleaning or less cleaning.
They all need cleaning. So you know, and they're all and look, you know, if you've got sweaty paws and you're handling them all over the gun, I mean, the gun.
Which Florida, Georgia, Texas, Louisiana, we're sweating like crazy here.
You're going to get a certain amount of. I mean, that's the nature of the game. I mean, it just is. You know, you're not going to get around it. Sometimes when you see some of these fine old guns, they'll have sort of a patina on them, and it's not rust, but it's a certain amount of oxidation has started. The owner wipes it off. You know, and for example, when we rust blue barrels, there's two different kinds of bluing. Okay, set aside all the modern you know treatments that they're doing today. Classic stuff, bluing. Okay, there's hot bluing, which is a sodium hydroxide base that has two other compounds in there. It's sodium hydroxide. A couple of, I don't even remember anymore. It's been a long time since I've made some, but we used to make our own bluing salts. Now we use the Dew-Lite salts that they make. But in any case, it goes into a bath mixed with water, and you go through a cleaning process, and then you cook the parts in that. And basically what it is, it's a controlled rusting. It's an oxidation, and the oxidation, the rust, is black, and it's more resistant to corrosion than the steel, the white bare steel underneath it. The other process is rust bluing, which is an acidic process where it's done cold. You wipe it on with a sponge or a cotton ball, you let it set and control heat and humidity for a period of time, several hours, then you boil it off in water and blow it off. It has to be carded, and then you repeat it. In rust bluing, my analogy is just like your sweaty hands, okay? You take and you put this solution on there, you let it rust a little bit, and then you're going to clean it off and you're going to stop the rusting. Well, that's what's happening when a shooter takes their gun out and they shoot a little bit and then they wipe it off and they say, ooh, tiny, tiny little bit of stuff. Well, you keep on doing that over a period of time, you're not getting that ugly brown rust. There's a little bit of a patina of color on a gun that is, you know, a good gun that is coin finished and doesn't have any kind of a treatment on it. The Beretta SL3s, some of the Parazzis, you know, that are white where you see the nice engraving, it'll create a little bit of a patina, and that can always be cleaned. You know, you can clean it with an abrasive, and you can make it just like new. It's when you get rust spots. Now that's actually eaten in and destroyed part of the steel. Right.
Interesting. working here, you get to learn a lot of the stuff that, for the most part, is not useful in my day, but it still goes in the head, right? And it is interesting for me from being the outside. I'm not a gunsmith. I never wanted to do it. And I'll tell you a story. One day when I started working here, if people don't know, I wasn't hired to work at the store by itself. I was hired to be work for John. And we ran out of things to do pretty quickly, so then moved me towards service, where I start learning. And so if you don't know, I was actually kicked out of Jonah's office because I asked too much questions. I asked too many questions all the time because I need to know why of things. I'm a terrible corporate employee, but let's say that. I need to know why. I can't just follow a plan blindly. And so we're learning from service that one day I ran out of things to do, and I made the mistake of going in the back and saying, do you have anything for me? And Reed said, talk to Brandon. I talked to Brandon, his son, which is a gunsmith here, and I did talk to Brandon, and Brandon quickly found me something for me to do, which was refinishing the stocks. And that was my biggest mistake I ever made in this company, which will never repeat it again, which is bend on your back all day long using two fingers to smoothly remove the finish without removing any checkering. And the most amount of movement you do is 1 inch back and forth for hours. You know, that will never happen again. My saying around here, I have smooth hands and I like it, and that's how they're gonna be. My point is, watching the guys learn through all these things, that when we do have a fresh new gunsmith, learning, see how they actually get to learn why things happen the way they happen, what they break, what to do when they fix. And I think that there's a lot more on the background that people would basically almost have to have a camera 24 hours a day at the gunsmithing bay. They would have much more appreciation for the gun that they are shooting, no matter the brand it is. How much actual work goes into it, and you gotta really love it, because there's no glory in it.
No, there isn't a whole lot of glory. I think that,
I mean, it only took you 45 years to get some glory.
I'm getting this interview after 45 years, so, finally I'm on your station. Finally, 45 years.
So it's important for people then to understand that it goes an enormous amount of work, and people don't just come knowing everything. And that's one thing I learned here, is that another thing that I wanted to ask is, there, from your trajectory, you said you went to Beretta, you wanted to learn about guns. Where did custom stock making come from? Because that is not a teachable thing.
Yeah. Custom. I never worked with a stock maker. I'm a self-taught stock maker, and I'm not an inletting guy, and the reason that I'm not an inletting guy is because I believe in, utilizing modern technology where modern technology can be utilized. And today we have a business partner in Italy, he's an expert with 5-axis CNC router, and he's the guy that does all of the inletting for us. He does for the Italian stock makers, a lot of the European guys that that make custom stocks over there. He does the inletting, and I have focused on watching different successful shooters, in their photos and their videos, and being at shoots and watching their move, watching the way that they mount, and seeing the differences in the shooter's mount versus their anatomy, and how that correlates to the gun. There are 3 aspects, of gun stock fit. There's the anatomy, which is simple. There's then the shape and the dimension of the gun stock, which is simple. And then there's the shooter's mechanics, which is very complex.
The mount, basically.
The shooter's mount. How do they mount the gun? And how do they feel when they mount the gun? How does that work for them? As a shooter improves in their technique and their mount, it becomes more disciplined. It becomes more consistent. It's a lot easier for me to work with a shooter that has a consistent mount in order to figure out what stock dimensions, what's the length. What's the pitch? What's all the comb drops and cast variations? What are all those numbers? How are those going to work best for the shooter? The shooter that's shooting at a high level, they can give me a lot of really pertinent feedback, and it may take some time working with them. We had Corey Cruz in here, and he drove me crazy all day long, to get to a pattern stock. I say drive me crazy in a nice way, in a happy way. We had a lot of fun working together. But you take somebody that like Corey, who's a top international shooter. He has a very, very keen sense of subtleties about the stock. Now, he can pick up anything and shoot it, okay, and do well. Better than I'm ever going to do, okay? But when you give him something that really, really suits him, then it builds his confidence level in terms of he's confident with his, with his gun. And I learned this by being in a shop where we have a lot of work, we have a lot of jobs, there's a lot going on all the time, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of really, really good shooters and sort of learn how to
What was
how
the
to do that.
first custom stock you ever made?
First custom stock I ever made was for a Beretta 687 for Mac McClure at the Dallas Gun Club, and that was probably 25 years ago.
Out of nowhere, just made a stock.
Well, he came to me. He wanted a custom stock made, and I had some blanks, and I had a few blanks made over in Italy by this partner, this guy I've been working with for all these years. I had a few blanks made. I don't even know why I had them made. I can't even remember how it is that I even had it.
So that was your very first custom stock.
I mean, my first custom stock was a Lee Enfield 303 bolt action rifle in high school, and nobody will ever see that.
So, which is the reason I ask is one of the gunsmiths here is Kyle.
Yeah.
Kyle started a week after I started here, so probably let's say 6 years now, and we have a lot of gunsmiths here. There are many gunsmiths that pass through here. We know a lot of gunsmiths, but making a custom stock is not a teachable thing. Because after watching these guys, for example, Kyle had it.
Yeah, I mean, either you have it or you don't. I mean,
it's
like an artist. It's like how many people want to say, I want to be an artist. I want to paint beautiful pictures of running horses through the field. Practice and practice and practice and practice, and you still can't paint anything that looks anything different than a pig. I mean, that's just the reality. You know what I mean? Either you have it or you don't. I mean, look, some people want to be a wonderful singer. Okay, you sound like a bullfrog. Give it up. Move on.
That was my plan first, but I realized it wasn't as good as I thought.
And I don't mean to be dismissive. I don't want to discourage anyone from making an attempt to do something. But we can take and learn how to work on a trigger. Okay, we can learn how to fit barrels. These are not easy, simple things to do, but they are mechanical. So if an individual has a mechanical aptitude and they're willing to have attention to detail, they can be taught to do that, okay? A stockmaker is an artist. There is an art form to doing that. And there's a shape, and a flow. You can make a stock that fits a shooter really, really well, and it's so ugly nobody would want to own it.
You have to understand the shape.
You've got to understand the shape. You've just got to, and it's a natural thing. And Kyle, I don't want to talk too much about Kyle on this video, because if we say too much good about him on this video, he's going to come to me and want more money.
Yep.
And I don't want to have to pay him more money, because I've already invested a lot. I mean, my guys, our guys, this is the other thing about gunsmithing. It's tough to earn a living today. Okay, none of these guys earn me any money for at least for a couple of years, and I still have got to pay them a pretty decent wage to put them in the position to whereby they can have a quality of lifestyle that they want to come to work every day. So
and that was the thing too. When I said there's no glory in it. For you to become a well-known gunsmith, you, Tim Ward, Les Pittman, and Ed, and has many others out there, but we know. Look at all you guys' age.
There's
at least 50 and up.
That's right. I mean, and that's not to take away. There was several years ago, my wife Jonna and I were talking about the future of sort of the fine shotguns and that, and we were saying we're kind of concerned because, those of us that really have developed a skill set that are capable of working on fine guns are kind of aging out of it. And very, very refreshingly now, I've seen some younger guys come in and are doing nice work and are doing good work. And so I feel differently about that today. I feel like there is some hope. You know, we've got a couple guys in our business. Kyle, as you talk about Kyle as a stalker, Kyle is 30 years old.
Brandon, you got Casey.
Brandon, Casey. I mean, these guys all have the level of talent that I have. They just don't have the experience, you know. And you know, they're talented, capable guys. You know, Warren down in Texas. Warren is 19 years old, you know, very, very talented, very focused. You know, one of the things that, you know, that we do, people say, well, Rich, how is it that it's so hard to find good gunsmiths, you know, and a lot of other dealers, you know, there are good dealers out there. We're not the only ones, right? But most dealers don't have gunsmiths, you know, and so how is it that Cole Gunsmithing can have this whole staff of guys? And it's like,
it takes an enormous amount of work.
It takes a lot of work. I mean, it takes a lot of work and a lot of commitment, you know, and, you know, like they say, it takes one to know one, you know, because I have the background that I have, when I meet someone and spend a little bit of time with them, I know I have a good sense of whether they're going to be able to cut this or not. You know, it's not an easy trade. You know, they're gonna have to work for quite some time. You know, getting paid just enough to get by before they get to the point to whereby they're making a journeyman's wage.
Yep.
You know, in our company, the gunsmiths that we have, the only gunsmith that we did not train is Andre Goyep. And Andre spent 16 years with Blaser, and Andre is a fantastic artisan. He's a really, really top-notch gunsmith, and he runs our shop in Texas, and he's training Warren, you know, so we are kind of deepening the pool of resources, you know. Jim Belgard up in Maine, I trained Jim. Jim's been with me for 23 years now.
Might be the best semi-auto gunsmith in the country.
I don't think there's anybody in the country that has his level of experience. You know, I think there are probably some good guys out there, but I mean, Jim has really earned his stripes. I mean, if somebody's got a Beretta semi-auto shotgun that's got a problem, if Jim can't fix it, throw it overboard. You know, because you know there's something deep and mysterious if that's the case.
But yeah, it's very interesting to see the guys coming in, and you see in each one of them it's almost like they go towards something.
Yeah.
They just naturally, like Brandon, for finishing work on wood. I don't think you are better than Brandon. For example,
his oil finishing, you know, and you look at what Kyle does with his spray finishing.
Well,
know?
Kyle is a custom stocking, you know what I'm saying, he's just incredible. But I'm saying Brandon, as far as finishing wise, I mean, we get some stuff here that if it was my gun, I was like, oh, I just screw it and buy a new gun, you know. But he does miracles on that. You have Casey coming in. Casey has he likes a lot of the old stuff. That doesn't mean don't send us a lot of the old 1920 guns here, please. But Casey loves that kind of stuff. He's really hungry, he just want to know everything.
Casey is hungry for the mechanics and
everything.
The mechanics.
Can you fix this? Like yeah.
We have Dave up in the main shop. He works for Jim. And Dave is very good, very much like Brandon, very, very painstaking about refinishing and, you know, and oil finishes. And someone that can do that can put that attention to detail in it, will be able to do a lot of different kinds of gunsmithing, because they're willing to spend the time that's necessary to understand what kind of modification needs to be made.
I done it. Really boring. Never do it again. No matter how much money you try to pay me, I will never be a gunsmith.
There's a life lesson in it.
It is. You gotta really love what you do, because
you know. So and you know, talking about the gunsmiths, you know, Pedro, it's like, you know, you and Dion and we've been over to Italy, you know, and worked together. Our work was more sales oriented.
Yeah.
Last summer we had Casey and Warren. We took them to Italy for 10 days and had them work. They spent a few days at Rizzini. They spent time at Zoli. They spent time at Beretta. And, you know, they're actually working with the gun makers, you know, at the bench with their shop aprons on, and they're doing it. You know, and that's very, very important. We want to do that again this year. I think that Brandon probably go with us again, you know, this year. But, you know, taking our gunsmiths over to Italy and having them actually work with the gun makers over there that are producing the products that we're selling and servicing here is really, really important, because what it's doing is that we want our gunsmiths to understand the culture of the people that are producing the fine guns.
Have an appreciation
for their culture, and understand a little bit about those people. Be able to put a face to the name of somebody that's working over there. And
it's pretty easy to get a gun here and say brand new gun, it has a problem. We do a lot of warranty work, right? Warranty for Bresini, Beretta, but you do a lot of work, and if it means it's warranty work, it usually means it's on a brand new gun. Like I said, it's a miracle that these guns work as well as they do, thinking how many hands it passes through, actually physical human hands instead of machines. So going over there, I certainly had an appreciation, because I work with guns anywhere from 2,000 up to, I've seen guns from 700,000. And naturally, as a human, you always go towards the very expensive stuff, and you start diminishing the value of the less expensive stuff. But, I remember being at Beretta and seeing how much work goes into building a Silver Pigeon 1, which is the bare bones starting line of a Beretta. Right.
Yeah, look at how many stations.
How much work it goes into it.
Through. Yep.
So, it brings me back to, I love the DT11 in black, but it brings me back like, I kind of appreciate the Silver Pigeon 1 now. Yeah. It's not just the least expensive. No, there's a lot that goes into it. So going over there and meeting those guys and getting to see the least expensive guns doesn't become now the least important or least appreciated gun.
That's right.
It's important.
Hey, look, I have, when I was a gunsmith with Beretta, I had the opportunity to buy a few guns. They were Y guns. And people say, well, what's a Y gun? It's a gun that was blemished, or it was a dealer sales sample, something to that effect.
Nowadays, the new Y guns are the demo guns that the Beretta travels and shows.
Right, that's right. And they use them for a while, and they sell them. And back when that started, they wanted to sell the guns, and we said, well, we need to identify them somehow so that they're not coming with a new gun warranty, because it's a used gun. So I took a Y character, turned it upside down, and stamped it after the serial number, because you can't alter the serial number, but an inverted Y is no longer a Roman numeral character. So we're not altering the serial number, and they've just continued to do that now for all these years. But I bought a couple. I bought a 686 back in the early 1980s, and I bought a 687. And I mean, both of those guns, I shot those guns extensively. I mean, I've fired so many rounds.
Is that still the same one that you have?
I still shoot it.
Yeah, you still shoot it. Yeah,
I still shoot it. I mean, the reality is, 40 years later, I'm shooting that gun, and I shot it hard. I mean, I shot thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds through that gun. Never had to do anything to them other than just the basic cleaning.
Huh. This conversation about the gunsmiths is very important, because I think certainly from you started, but since I started, the sport has grown. The sport of clay shooting overall has grown tremendously.
Yes.
And COVID had a lot to do with it. I mean, during COVID,
got people outdoors.
Oh yeah, you could buy a boat, buy a four-wheeler, or go shoot stuff and fish. That's about all you could do. And
bicycle sales were pretty good.
Yeah, bicycle sales were pretty good. I mean, here we never closed, but the foot traffic, there was none. But I remember that we were coming in at 7 a.m. The store only opened at 10. We were coming in at 7 a.m. The store closed at 5 and leaving 8 o'clock at night. That was the amount of sales happening.
Yeah.
People, I mean, the sport just exploded. So you do a quick math in your head. You're like, that's just simple math. I sold 1,000 guns to 1,000 new shooters. That is 1,000 guns to fix at some point.
Yep, that's right.
Where are these gunsmiths?
Well, where are they? Vince was doing our marketing manager. Vince was, looking at. He had some interesting numbers with the NSCA. How many shooters there are in the NSCA, and how many guns they buy over a period of time. How many guns that are out there versus how many gunsmiths there are, and then how many capable gunsmiths are there to work on high quality play target guns. Yeah. It's good that we've got a few young guys getting started in this sport.
Well, Brenda had 3 kids, so we have 3 more coming in about 18 years.
Yeah, we got 3 more in about 18 years.